And joining us now on the debate, Megan Harris, Senior Fellow at the Montreal Economic Institute. Shannon Boodram, editor of the book Laid, Young People's Experiences with Sex in an Easy Access Culture. And Charles McVety, president of the Canada Christian College. And of course, we welcome back Lyba Spring, Sexual Health Educator with Toronto Public Health. And a reminder that this is a Your Agenda Thursday broadcast, so we want you involved. You can reach us at Twitter. Twitter.com/theagenda is the address, or by email at theagenda@tvo.org. And as he always is, our fifth column blogger Mike Miner is hosting a live online chat at our Inside Agenda blog, tvo.org/theagenda. Dial us up, jump in, and join the debate. Mike, and we'll get to you for an update about halfway through the program. Okay, welcome everybody. Good to have you back in the studio tonight. Yeah, first time for you, Shannon, but
yes,
you two have been here before. Yes. Let me read, because we got a bunch of emails, posts, and so on today. Here's a couple of them that have informed our discussion tonight. Michael, if you would, let's put these up. Leaving sex ed to parents may be the ideal, but that assumes that parents do in fact teach it, let alone teach it well. The other issue is that the majority of children are seeing pornography at very young ages, and do we know what the implications of that are? That's from one. Here's another one we got on our website. I just don't think it's necessary to teach children these kinds of adult issues at such a young age. There is a certain innocence about children that I feel should be preserved until a certain age. It's better for young children just to enjoy simple things like sports, playing with Lego, etc. Those were the two views that we basically got. Let's go around the horn. You know that Lyba has sort of set the table for us on the discussion that we've had. Charles, why don't you pick up on what you heard in the first segment?
I think the secrecy of this program has set up a false dichotomy, because we're really not talking about whether or not to teach sex ed or not. Because of course sex ed has been part of our curriculum for generations, really, at least decades. But what has happened here is that special interest groups have come forward, and they've been able to insert their material into very young age groups, and that's what we have protested. That's what we've come out and said, you know what, this is inappropriate.
What's a
for an
special interest group?
Well, you know, especially the GLBT community that puts forward
gays, lesbians, bisexual, transgender.
Okay. And to teach a little 8-year-old in grade 3 gender identity, and to lead that little 8-year-old through a lesson on whether or not he or she is a male trapped in a female body or vice versa, to teach about 6 genders. I mean, most adults don't know anything about 6 genders.
You think that's inappropriate for that age?
I think gender identity is inappropriate for any elementary or even high school discussion.
Okay.
This is something that goes into university or even graduate school.
Okay, Shannon, give me your take on it.
Going from the emails, the very first email talked about the fact that, yes, we've got a generation of kids who have grown up with the porn industry. And that being that, there's a great article in Details magazine that says by the time the boys are 16 years old, 90% of them will have watched an hour of online porn. The current sex ed curriculum has been a long-running joke amongst people that I know and younger.
Joke in what respect?
You don't, for example, I was in grade 6 and we had someone come in and say, sexual intercourse is when a man and woman hug very tightly because they love each other. And me and my friends, they were like, laugh, like, oh, we know more about sex than she does. Because it's all, we know already.
Where did you find out?
I found out when I was probably in kindergarten or so. You find out about what sex is. You learn about the real details, the real information, probably when you do get into grade 4, grade 5, grade 6.
Who'd you learn it from?
Friends, probably internet, movies, music videos. There's just, you're bombarded with sexual imagery all the time.
Okay, where are parents and school on that list?
My parents were there. My parents definitely had the conversations with me, but they did the tactic of asking me any questions. And at that time, you kind of need people to start the discussion with you. I think the curriculum is doing a great job of beginning the discussion. And you know what McVety is saying is correct, that it's unfortunate that we have to talk about these things to our children. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's unfortunate. We wish they could be innocent forever, but that doesn't mean that it's not what they need.
Megan.
Well, I think, you know, sex education, as Charles said, has been a part of the school curriculum for a very long period of time, and I think that's important. Now, irrespective of whether it's this curriculum or the one that's there right now, it's the person who's teaching it who will determine how much the kids will know. So obviously, if someone comes into you at grade 6 and say, sex is 2 people hugging, then that's ridiculous. And will that necessarily change with this more detailed curriculum going forward?
Do you have any objections to the curriculum as it was laid out?
That being said, I do believe that the most important element in this are the parents. Parents have a responsibility as parents to talk to their children
What if
about.
they don't?
But I don't think it's the right of the teachers. I don't think that's the role of the public education system, especially in grade 1, grade 3, to start talking explicitly about sex with kids. I've spoken to a number of my friends who are parents. And yes, it's important to talk to them about the anatomy and the biology of the body. But to go into explicit details at such a young age, I completely disagree with it.
Lyba.
Well, when you look at the research, more than 85% of Canadian parents want sexuality education taught at school. And I brought all my, I have all my toys with me.
Let's just get, what's the source of that?
I can reach, but I don't have my glasses.
But you say it again, you said 65%?
No, over 85% of Canadian parents want sexuality education. And that is based on research in CCAN, Sexual Health Education in the Schools Questions and Answers, 3rd edition.
Is that a poll?
Yeah.
It's a poll. From what polling organization?
Oh, now, you know, here's my yellow sticky. No, seriously.
If we're going to throw numbers out, we got to be able to back them up, that's all.
That's fine. I could do it. But what I'm saying is that they quoted, I was reading it this afternoon, they quoted not just one, but several polls that were done over several years. And these figures have remained very high. There was a recent one in BC. And there was a recent one in Saskatchewan.
Okay. Megan, you want to follow?
I follow Steve's line of questioning in terms of who conducted this poll, who did they ask?
What question was asked?
Precisely, because clearly, I mean, yes, parents would want some degree of sexual education taught, but the level of detail, is that what they really want? That was what was proposed in this document here. And I really would question that. And if it was the case that the level of support was so high, why was there such a strong rejection of this?
And I'm curious about that.
That's a good question. Let's get that question out there. Let's one question at a time, Megan. Go ahead.
No, I'm curious about that. I mean, I know that there has been a lot of talk in the media about numbers of people who are opposed to the curriculum. But again, you know, I found it really interesting. I wasn't sure who the parents were, because as I was reading editorials in newspapers and so on, and I was listening to people on the radio, I was thinking, it sounds like people are really in favor of this curriculum.
And why would the Premier back down?
Oh, that's a political question, which I'm not prepared to discuss.
Well, because I think this curriculum, I've read that it said they consulted with 70 groups. I'd be interested to know who this group was, number one, and not a single person, whether liberal, NDP, conservative, or green that I've spoken with, supports this curriculum, this element of it. So I'm very interested to know who were composed of 70 groups that were consulted, because the reaction was so strong.
Charles wants to follow.
That's the issue here. And again, another false dichotomy. We're not talking about no sex education or some sex education. Children need to know the dangers of promiscuity. They need the dangers of premature sex. They need to know these things.
You both agree on that?
Absolutely.
Nobody is against that.
You both agree on that.
But this was very secretive, and as a member of the Toronto Health, you know, I'm surprised you don't know who the parents are, because parents were very upset. All we did was put out a press release and divulge the material that's in this book. 19 times teaching about gender identity, 24 times teaching about sexual orientation. Again, another false parallel between anal intercourse, as this says, and vaginal intercourse. That is a lie. There is no parity between these two things. Anal intercourse is unnatural.
Let's be clear, because Lyba did say it in the interview. She said it wasn't about teaching kids how to do it. It was about avoiding the dangers that are associated with it. You accept that?
No, I don't, because you read about masturbation and it talks about how pleasurable it is and how good it is to do and how to explore you. Well, there you go. But I don't want you teaching my 12-year-old the pleasures of masturbation. You have no right to do this to our children. You need to listen to the parents. And you know what? The Premier listened. And he found the experts wanting, because when he read this, he said, "What? This material in our schools at the age of 8?" And he pulled it and rightfully said, "We're going to strip that away." And by the way, you are right that the sex ed part of this is a very small part of this book.
And 10 pages out of 200 plus, I think.
Yeah, and so they're going to remove that. They're going to continue with the rest of the 190 some odd pages. They're going to go back to the drawing board, and they're not just going to listen to the experts, they're going to listen to parents.
Okay, Shannon, you wanted to.
Last week we were on Ladru, myself and Charles here, and we had numerous parents call in and say, it's disgusting. It is disgusting. And they say, what's disgusting? That it's this age? No, that they even talk about it at all. Sex should not be discussed at all. You've got way too many parents who want to sweep this under the rug. You've got way too many people not understanding what it means to be sexually active or sexual in today's easy access culture who want to sweep this under the rug. It's a big difference between people understanding what kids know and what we're wishing that they do know. I think what's great about this, and it bothers me you keep talking about the dangers, because as you mentioned, sexuality is not a negative thing. It isn't something to be ashamed of or to wait until you're 17 until you go there, because it's part of us. As we grow, we learn and come into our own sexuality. Our education system should alleviate the pressure of that by talking about it, by educating us. And before we get our periods,
at age?
The ages that you're facing these things. And as somebody who's discussed and talked to
At
people.
age 6?
At 6 years old, as we'll be discussing what? Talking about body parts?
Body parts are fine. And
That's age 6. At age 9 or 10 is when we're discussing and saying this is what homosexuality is. This
I
is
think
why
that's
it's not
premature.
okay. But it's not premature when you go to basketball camps, as I did this summer, and when every kid misses a shot, they're gay, they're a fag, they're a homo. These are the common slurs that they have. They don't understand that. And imagine if you're somebody with 2 moms or 2 dads, how are you supposed to feel when that's how they identify that? And so many kids each year commit suicide or go into depression because they are homosexual and they're afraid to come out.
Let me just follow
If we
up.
begin the discussion, we save a lot of people a lot of pain.
Lyba, stand by 1 second. What's an appropriate age to raise the issue of homosexuality at?
you know what, I don't think I could give you a global age. I think this is where there is individual elements, because for children, for parents especially, they can see when their children are starting to change, and they can understand when it's a good time, their bodies are changing, and it's time to introduce certain level of conversation.
The city here says it's grade 3. You think that's too early?
I do think that's too early. I would think grade 6 would be appropriate, but I don't think grade 3 is
Grade
appropriate.
6, so age 11.
Age 11.
You don't
Just
think
they're
by
on
age
the
11
cusp
they
of-
already know all this stuff?
I think by the age of 11, they will have some knowledge of it, but to go in for teachers to begin an explicit discussion of it, I don't think age 3 is appropriate.
Lyba?
In terms of the age?
Yeah.
Well, I was listening to a guy commenting on the radio this morning, and he was saying, it was part of a talk show, CBC actually, and he was, no, it was yesterday, Ontario Today, pardon me, and he was saying, I knew I was different when I was 5 years old. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have a name for it. But I knew that I liked guys, that I was attracted to guys. And he said it would have been so helpful to me to have somebody explain to me as I was growing up that this difference that I felt had to do with my orientation. And I think that when we're talking, first, as I said before, you know, kids know anyway, they learn it anyway. But when they talk to a teacher in school, when it's raised in school in the context of there are different families, some families have a grandmother and that's their family. Some families have 2 parents, some have 1 parent. Some live in a whole group of people, and some people have 2 parents of the same sex. Some have, like, when you're talking about families, it's really very innocuous. I have a feeling that what some people are thinking is that when we're talking about orientation, that what we're saying is, well, here's what gay people do, and we're talking in grade 3. You know, when they ask me the question in the question box, okay, the anonymous question box, they say, how do gay people do it, right? This is what the question. So I never give them a graphic answer. I contextualize it by saying that when people love each other and they're making love with each other, they find ways to give each other pleasure. And I'm not going to give them the specifics because no 2 couples, whether heterosexual or homosexual, make love in exactly the same way.
And that's okay, eh, Charles? The way it's been described there?
No, I object to that because, of course, what you're teaching is the parallel between homosexuality and heterosexuality. You're teaching that anal sex and vaginal sex, as this book says, is the same. It is not the same.
Okay, well,
anal
let's
sex
clarify.
is very unnatural. Anal sex is the mix of blood and human excrement, and it brings in tremendous disease. And that's why you need to teach them the realities of this. And if you're going to do that, then fine, at an appropriate age. But by the way, this is not just about homosexuality. It's about gender identity, which has nothing to do with homosexuality. It has to do with being a male trapped in a female body, or go into these other genders, to be transgendered, transsexual, intersex, two-spirited.
Do you think these things don't exist?
No, I think they do exist. But should we be bringing these things to little children at the age of 8? Should we even be bringing them into high school? Should we lead them in exercises
I think you need to speak to
doubt their own gender?
Well, I think you need to speak to her point, which is there are people out there who know they are different from a very young age, and this kind of education at that young age would not make them feel like outsiders.
So we'll deal with the aberration. Don't teach all
Aberration's
of the
a pretty tough word.
Well,
That's a fairly pejorative word.
No, I'm not using it in a pejorative way. It's not the majority. It's not the vast majority. It's a very, very small group. We have Christians in school and evangelicals, and sure, Jesus Christ is the #1 curse word in the playground. But you don't teach Christianity to everybody, because not everybody is a Christian. And you don't teach homosexuality to every child, because not every child is a homosexual. So you don't teach it in that light.
Let's get something on the other. Shannon, go ahead.
Not every child has got a physical ailment or is handicapped, but we teach them that this is why this person is different. This is why it's okay to accept this person. This is why it's not good to make fun of that person. There's a very small majority of the kids out there who do have some type of physical disability, but we still want to promote equality. We still want to promote diversity, and of all things, tolerance for each other. And just to make the school process as least stressful as possible for everybody as possible. And if defining what homosexuality is at 9 or 10, when you've already have What Not to Wear on TLC that comes on, or Drag Queen, America's Next Top Drag Queen that comes on, they already have an inclination of what these things are. Let's define it in a classroom setting and set our foot down and say it's not okay to discriminate.
I want to get you two to speak to this, though. And Michael, let's go to the graphics on the top of page 2 here. This is the world in which we live today. Let's run these and say, to understand the sex education your child is already getting, we did a few Google searches, okay? Go on Google, enter the word, let's roll this if we can. Go on Google, just enter the word sex. You get 590 million results. On the first page of the results, there were at least 5 pornographic websites based on the Google descriptions alone, and the Wikipedia article on sex was ranked 3rd. Now put makeout in there and you get 555 million hits for that. The first page includes instructional websites, YouTube videos, Google images on making out, and a Wikipedia page. You put boob in there, just boob. You get 15,500,000 results, and you got websites, YouTube videos about boob jobs, and of course a Wikipedia page. And as we all know from being online, these are rather tame terms. Put abstinence in there, you get 5.7 million hits for the word abstinence, which is a lot smaller than all of the other ones. Lyba, this is the world in which our children are growing up, and which, I'm sure you can appreciate this, which some parents feel is beyond their control, and they're frightened about what their kids are learning. So what would you say to them?
That they should be the ones to teach them. That they should start from the beginning
How
teaching
do
their
they
kids.
compete with 590 million hits?
Well, it's amazing the power of parenthood, because when you're teaching your values, your culture, your religion, when kids are growing up with that, they're growing up with something very powerful that gives them a grounding. So that when you say, you're probably going to see some stuff on the internet and it's going to be kind of nasty. If you ever come across anything like that and you want to talk to me about it, that's okay. Because I can explain to you what you saw and make you feel a little better.
Megan, in an internet world where 590 million hits are available to any 7-year-old who knows how to run a computer, do you have to start introducing this at a younger age so that there is good information to compete with bad information?
You know what? For a 7-year-old to hit sex, and it's a term they hear, but do they really know what it means?
Well, it's not too hard to type.
It's
You
not
know what I'm saying? You can find that pretty easily on the internet.
No, fair enough. But look how much information kids, or all of us, gets thrown at us. And do we always know what it means? And so are they going to sit there and feel that they need to explore it fully, or will they move on to the next thing? And I think my feeling on this is that if we start belaboring the point that, you know, at this stage in your life, you need to know the anatomy, you need to know how it works, you need to know all of that, I think that's too much for a child. I personally think for kids, yes, they are getting exposure to some of these labels, but the level of detail and whether or not that should be a part of the public school curriculum at that stage in their life, that's what I disagree with.
Well, let me understand then, Charles McVety, what's acceptable. If you were running sex ed for Ontario, what would you teach and at what age?
Well, first of all, I agree that the key here is the parent. Yeah. Because the parent is going to teach that child to make the right choices. And there's no question that children are faced with choices that none of us had to make at a very young age. The parents need to be an integral part of this. Will the classroom, will the teacher be an integral part of teaching that material to the child? I don't think that the teacher is going to make the difference. I think the parent would.
But is there a role for the classroom teacher in teaching sex ed? And if so,
yes,
at what age?
Absolutely, and I believe that we need to teach the dangers of promiscuity, the dangers of sexual transmitted diseases. I think at a fairly young age, and we are not balking at that.
Okay, is grade 7 okay?
Well, I think we should be teaching them at grade 7. I remember in grade 7, it wasn't that long ago for me, but I remember in grade 7, they scared the life out of me and said, watch out, don't get involved in this. But that's not what's in this curriculum. Gender identity, sexual orientation. Again, these are the complex things to confuse our little children's minds and take away their innocence.
Shannon.
I really want to focus on the Google search there because you put in the articles. If you went to images, what you saw would be completely different. There is absolutely no censorship online, and to hope that your child just breezes past it is a great hope. It's a great hope. It's not a realistic one. So I think we're not giving honest discussion enough credit here. In my book, for example, there's been people who have been doing certain sexual behaviors for years, and just to see that somebody else, as in myself, went through it, explained it, and was open and honest about it, it gave them now freedom and courage to start questioning themselves, to start saying, why do I do this? Why do I feel this way? Is this okay? If nobody ever talks about it, you go on making the same mistakes the rest of your life, never having had an open conversation about it. We are not giving enough credit to the fact that if a teacher who now has got some type of educational basis, because a parent, you never know where they're coming from in terms of what they actually know about sex.
Teachers are parents too.
Yeah, that's correct, but a teacher is going to be given the curriculum to read. They're going to have to do research. They're going to have a certain level of knowledge.
One hopes.
A parent
Shannon,
has got none.
Tell me this. If you're a parent and you're uncomfortable with the notion of your child learning about sexual activities, including oral and anal sex in grade 7, should you have the right to pull them from that class?
I think, yes, you should have the right to pull them from that class if you are going to, in lieu of that, sit down and do it your way. So if you are saying to yourself, you're realizing, even if my child isn't there yet, I know their peers are. If I don't want them to have it from another stranger, I want it from me, pull them from that class, but spend that day talking about sex ed.
I wonder if we have consensus here. Because you agree with that too, don't we?
We certainly have consensus on the issue of sex ed, but again, that's not what the parents are balking at here.
But what she just said was, hang on, what she just said was, if a parent is uncomfortable with this much detail about sex ed, you ought to have the right to pull your kid from the class.
And that's what the Minister of Education tried to say as well, but that is impossible because, again, you know, it's only 10%. It's only 10% of this, but this book is laced with this.
Well, so what do you mean? We do it all the time?
How can you take your child out of every class? It's impossible.
Let's find it. You say you do it all the time?
When I say we do it all the time, we see that. It depends on the school board. Okay, here's how it goes with the Toronto District School Board. A letter of information goes out and says that we're doing this part of the curriculum right now, and this is for your information. If you have any questions or concerns, please call so-and-so. In some school boards, they have a permission form. For example, in the Catholic School Board. In the Francophone Public School Board, they have a permission form. So that means that if the parent does not want their child to be at that part of the curriculum, then they're going to pull their child. And that's something that is, that's part of the accommodation.
And the school board is okay with that?
Well, it's the school board's policy.
It's the policy. All right, so then you two are not that far apart, are you?
No, of course not. But I would like to
because-
come back to another
Well,
point.
why should our children be marginalized, taken out of the class? We're paying for these classes. Why should they be removed?
You're saying the information
I think
should
it
be
should be
removed.
proactive. If you want to teach sexually explicit things and gender identity and sexual orientation to a child, you should get the signature of the parent saying, yes, you can do it. And if the parent signs off on it, so be it.
Okay, time
but
out
if
one
I don't
second.
sign off on it, don't dare do it to my child.
We are going to come back to this, but while we're having this debate in the studio, Mike Miner is monitoring the online debate that is happening on our website right now, and we always like to go to some undisclosed location inside our building here at 2180 Yonge Street at Yonge and Eglinton in Midtown Toronto. Mike, fill us in. What are they saying?
There's a lot of different topics that this has been divided down into. One of the things that's really broken down, there seems to be an audience in this chat that says that parents should be teaching values and teachers should be teaching fact. And that's countered by a bunch of people who say you cannot possibly imagine that teachers don't teach values, that just doesn't come across in the education process. One of our chatters, Joe, says that an important question is how does a school teach the topic of sex without bringing up concepts of morality and religious beliefs? And he's particularly concerned because even just the mention of some of these topics, such as homosexuality, run counter to certain religious beliefs, and he doesn't think that that's a line that should be crossed. Saris worries that treating sex as scary and taboo might make kids less safe. Rosie was surprised how quickly that the curriculum was scrapped, and thinks it was clear that this wasn't a how-to type of curriculum, and worries that there's been a lot of misinformation going on around this. She also worries and says it's all very well and good to say that parents should be teaching their kids about sex, but will they? And Dan points out that if we allow parents to decide when it's time to teach kids, it's an article of faith that they actually do. And what matters is the community of youth here engaging in sex. If some people know a lot and some people know a little, there's still a risk to all parties. It's the knowledge of the community that's important is one of the themes that's coming up here.
Okay, Mike, thanks. We'll check back with you just before the top of the clock and get another update on what people are saying online. tvo.org/theagenda or our Twitter accounts if people want to get in there. There's the addresses at the bottom of the screen. Let me just read something, Rosie. Michael, I'm on page 5 at the top. Toronto Star, Rosie DeMano column from April 23rd. Let's put this up and then there'll be a question that comes out of that. Rosie DeMano, who's of course one of the best columnists in the city, writes very provocative stuff. Parents are rightly proprietary, she writes, about their children and the morals they hope to nurture in them. In such a richly multicultural city, where so many families are immigrants and first-generation Canadians of diverse, often conservative faiths and cultures, it was demanding a great deal for parents to accept invasive sex instruction in the schools at complete variance with ethics taught at home. Lyba, is this province and this city simply too diverse to come up with a one-size-fits-all sex ed curriculum?
No. The reason I say that is because I work with immigrant communities. I teach ESL to adults, and I ask them the question, do you think it's important for children to learn about sexuality? And we have a long discussion. Well, I know when people talk about, our diverse community and immigrant communities, she qualified, but a lot of people equate immigrant with conservative, religious with conservative. People are not homogeneous in their communities, they're heterogeneous. And so when I'm talking to parents, I'm talking with them about when I explain to them the rationale that this is primary prevention, and when I explain to them that we work with them in partnership, the parents that I work with buy it.
Megan, if it's about prevention, if it's about safety, if it's about understanding sexuality better, can you create a one-size-fits-all?
I think, again, it's the process through which you come to this policy decision. And what I think this document shows is that this government failed to adequately engage in a proper consultative process with the various stakeholder groups so that by the time this reached the stage it did, you wouldn't have had the kind of revolt you had, and therefore they had to pull it. So what they need to do is to really engage in a much broader discussion with various parents from different communities at an earlier stage toward developing the right policy.
We just had a question come up on the screen. Michael, can we get a wide shot here where we can see everybody? Because the question that came up on the screen here was from a viewer who said, I'm watching this debate and I want to know how many people on this program tonight are parents who know firsthand what they're talking about. You have children?
Yep, 2 adults.
What do you got?
A boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl. Charles?
A boy and a girl, 12-year-old and a 21-year-old.
12 and a 21.
I do not, but before coming on the show, I spoke with 4 different friends who have children and asked them this question. I also spoke with people at my office who have children, and I did not find anyone who was supportive of this.
Shannon?
I'm 24, so I don't have kids yet. But I am somebody who just came through this process, so I think that's where I stand in this debate.
Okay. Your mother, who I met earlier tonight in the green room, is thinking right now, 24, no kids. Thank God, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Or maybe not. Maybe not. Is she ready to be a grandmother?
She is my older sister.
Oh,
so
okay, but
she's,
not from you.
Not for me, no.
Okay.
I think that as a parent who discusses sex education, discusses morals, you should be thankful or happy that your child's now going to come home and have cause for discussion. Before that point, the talk is very hard to bring up. If your child can come home and say, today in school we talked about this, Mom, and now she can discuss values and morals, that's great. Because by the time they get to 12, 13, 14, they don't want to talk to you at all anymore. Whatever you say doesn't matter because they're not listening. So if you can have those discussions, those crucial discussions, as early as possible, as a parent, you should be glad that that's going to happen and take place.
You know what I liked? When Lyba said earlier that there's a letter that goes out in the Toronto District School Board, I'd like to know if it goes out in more than 2 different languages. Does it go in all the different ethnic languages?
Oh, probably depends on the school. I imagine
See,
it's the
I think
principal that makes the
that's
decision.
very, very important. Because I think when you were speaking with Steve, you talked about French and English. I think it's critical that it's in a language that the parents can understand, so they know what their children are being taught. And so that, to take Shannon's point, before the parent is aware that this discussion is going to take place, so they don't have to wait for the child when they come home to say, oh, in class we discussed it. It's a more proactive, interactive process.
How many parents don't know how to breach the topic, though? How many parents have got no clue how to bring up sex to their kids? Many do. So if your child can come home and say to you and now start asking questions, it makes it a heck of a lot easier.
We're not necessarily saying different things, but one of the things that's of concern to me is that when this topic is going to be discussed in the school, in the classroom, I think it's absolutely important that it's communicated in a language that parents can understand.
Let me ask Charles this. What do you do?
So parents are fully aware.
One second, Meg. What do you do, Charles, about the children whose parents are either too uncomfortable or don't want to raise this issue, but they need the knowledge about safety and so on? What do you do for them?
First of all, the presumption that parents are somehow deficient is something that I don't think.
There will be some who won't.
I don't think we start there. I don't expect people to tell me how to raise my children, and I'm not going to tell other people how to raise their children. I'm certainly not going to ask for advice from someone who's written a book called Laid to teach my child, 12-year-old girl, about sex education. I am a parent. We parents know how to teach our children. Now, in the case where a parent is completely deficient, does that exist? Well, I think that can be dealt with specifically. But again, you don't bring.
What does that mean,
You deal with if a child is having trouble, and they are having trouble sexually, then you can take them aside and deal with these things.
Isn't it too late at that point?
Let's talk about sexual trouble, shall we? Let's talk about sexual abuse, okay? So if we're not talking with children about sexual abuse and they don't understand what it is, and they don't have a word to describe what's happening to them.
Teach the dangers of sex
Sure.
abuse.
It's not just
Teach them the dangers,
But-
and when the parent doesn't do that, and when the parent doesn't listen, they need to have someone to go to. So what we need to do in school is incorporate these issues into the discussion.
Appropriate age.
Where is it? Where is it?
I actually
gender
found
identity.
I found a point of entry.
What are the dangers? what is gender identity refers to a person's internal sense of feeling or being male or female, which may or may not be the same thing as one's biological sex. Where is the danger? Where are we talking about danger to a child of abuse?
Actually, I'll tell
No.
you. Let me refer exactly
It's
to that point.
indoctrination.
I'll refer
let's let her
exactly
finish.
to that point. The reason why Shannon mentioned earlier that there are gay teenagers who have a higher suicide rate isn't because they're gay. It's not because they're gay, it's because of the hatred that surrounds them. It's because some kids who are coming out to themselves as gay or lesbian, or kids who believe that they're transgender, if they don't have the support that they need to have in the family, they end up in the street. I work in a shelter. I work in clinic. I see these kids every day. So I think that what we need to look at is how do we protect our children? And incidentally, I'd like to come back to a point you made earlier about this equation, the so-called equation between vaginal and anal sex. Yes, let's talk about that.
That's what you want to teach my child.
In clinic, I remember a couple came in and they were having anal sex because she needed to preserve her virginity because of her culture.
This is the myth.
Excuse me.
That's misogynistic.
I beg your pardon.
Can we have you finish the point and then you can respond?
I'd be happy
Finish the
to.
point,
I'd be
please.
happy to finish my point. This couple was practicing anal sex. It was a heterosexual couple. They practiced anal sex. They explained to me because in her culture she needed
Which
to
culture?
make. I'm not going to label their culture. But they explained to me that she needed to preserve her virginity. We have an intake sheet at clinic, and I'm telling you that in the intake sheet at clinic, we ask them the question, do you have vaginal sex, anal sex, oral sex? And a lot of heterosexual couples say they have anal sex. So when you say earlier we have to teach them about dangers, of course we do. We cannot teach them about the sexually transmitted infections
Do not
unless
attack women.
Okay, equal time here.
attack women.
Yeah, that is offensive to women. And to say that women are so stupid to practice anal sex because they want to preserve their virginity. This is the myth. This is the rumor. This is what people phone in and try to put forward.
She just gave you a tangible example.
Yeah.
No, she didn't give a tangible.
Would you like their names? Like obviously can't give you their names.
No, she gave an antidote. She gave no studies. There are no studies
Anecdote,
on this.
I think you meant.
Anecdote. What did I say?
You said antidote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I flipped.
But you did give a specific example.
A specific example, but not, and I would even question the validity of such an example, but there are no studies on this. This is nonsense.
Okay, let me do one more thing. How am I doing on time? What do you got? Minute and a half? Boy, time flew tonight. Okay, you ran for politics, so you get the question about Prime Minister Trudeau's famous expression, the state has no business in the bedrooms of the nation. Does this violate that?
I think this really pushes the envelope. But since we only have a few minutes to go.
No, we don't have a few minutes. We have 1 minute. So be fast.
At the end of the day, I think sex education in school is important, but I think it's appropriate to not to start at too young an age with very specific details. I think it's important to talk about the anatomy and the biology.
Get that. Shannon, with very little time left here, can you tell us? You know, Trudeau said the state doesn't belong in the bedrooms of the nation.
Nor does it.
Is what you're teaching here?
Yes, they do.
Keep faith with that?
If you want to worry about your child's well-being and them growing up to have a healthy relationship with themselves and others, this is very important. And I think it's time that we adjust what we hope they're thinking to what they're actually thinking and giving our children the chance to have the discussion rather than the one-time talk.
Lyba, you want the last word?
Sure. In the Toronto Teen Survey, the kids say that they want to learn about relationships and pleasure. They want more details about HIV and AIDS. And that's precisely what we plan to do.
Okay.
Teen.
Teen, what'd you say?
Teen, not adolescents.
Okay. I got
Sorry,
enough time.
teen, not elements.
I got time left to thank everybody. That's it. What side? Where do you want to go first, Michael? What side of the table? That side of the table. Shannon Boodram, the author of Laid, Young People's Experiences with Sex in an Easy Access Culture. Charles McVety will not be one of your sales on that book.
No,
I regret telling you. Lyba Spring from Toronto Public Health, thank you for being there on the left-hand side of the table. Megan Harris from the Montreal Economic Institute. Charles McVety from the Canada Christian College on the right-hand side of the table. Thanks, everybody, for this very energetic discussion tonight.